Neutral take on separatism in Canada. Okay, I wanted to hear.
Canada. Alberta would be better off if we separated from the rest of Canada.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think the percent of people that want separation is still really, really low. But from my understanding, it is a growing.
Quebec independence is going to be a great opportunity. They have to view the project as an opportunity to create a new country together.
In 1995, a referendum in Quebec was decided with 50 to 49% against declaring independence.
Ooh. Let me see that. 50.6 to 59.4. 92% participation. Whoa. Like, I don't know if the referendum itself allows you to, like, yourself from Canada. I think there's other hurdles you've got to cross, more referendum. But that is close. I feel for a large change like this, like we saw this in the UK, right? Brexit, when themselves from the European Union by a slim majority. I think you need a super majority if you want to create this kind of change. This is drastic. Check. The UK Brexit vote. What was the percentage to leave and the percentage to stay? And what percentage of people voted? Ooh, I got expert mode on. It's going to take a while. That's the good fly anymore. I would like to forget about that. This one. 0.6 to 50. Okay, here we go. In 2016, UK EU membership referendum, commonly known as the Brexit vote, leave the European Union 51.9, Maine 48.1. So 2% was the difference. % more wanted to leave. How many people? Turnout only 72.2% registered vote. Quebec, a much larger turnout, and it's much closer. Much closer.
49% against declaring independence. Recent polls show that about a third of their population today would still vote to leave, and that figure is now even higher in Alberta.
It's been an abusive relationship for so long, really. I think most of us just want out.
I feel that Alberta have everything to be a country.
Support for independence has never been this high, and recently, the news broke that separatists in Alberta met with officials from the Trump administration to discuss a $500 billion line of credit should the province separate. They are now collecting signatures to trigger a referendum later this year, while in Quebec, elections are coming up. The ruling party won the previous elections with 45% of the vote, but their popularity has since declined. Today, only 15% would vote for them, while the Parti Québécois has become the most popular party. Their main campaign promise is to hold another referendum on independence should they be elected. But while the issues that fuel these movements are very real, would declaring independence solve anything? Or is separatism a form of political currency? This is whether Canada is actually breaking up with hindsight.
And I think there is
I think there's a fear, but I don't think that they're breaking up at all, honestly.
fear that the future of the country is at risk. I think it leaves us needing to consider a new constitutional conference.
If Alberta would declare independence, they would take most of Canada's oil and they would be landlocked between Canada and the United States. They would still not have access to the Pacific or the Atlantic, and they would have to renegotiate trade deals and potentially face tariffs. If Quebec would leave, the Atlantic provinces would be cut off from the rest of Canada, and they would take about a quarter of Canada's population. In this video, I'll explain briefly the structural and long-term trends behind these four opposing camps. Those that are opposing and supporting independence in Alberta and in Quebec. And especially in the case of Alberta, the roots of these tensions can be traced back all the way to the founding of Canada. In 1867, the Federation of Canada began with 4 original provinces, and they agreed that each would maintain control over its resources. Prince Edward Island and British Columbia later joined, and Manitoba was the first province to be carved out.
Look at the tiny Manitoba there. that's where it started.
Of this enormous area in between. The region was sparsely inhabited by indigenous groups and early settlers, and the key to settling the West was to build infrastructure. Ottawa created Alberta and Saskatchewan, but they were not given the same control over its resources. The federal government wanted to coordinate national development and to manage immigration, but the people in these provinces felt that they were not treated as an equal. And after years of pressure in 1930, they were finally given control, but this history still influences the debate today. By 1949, Canada had most of its current shape, but it was unclear what would happen if a province decided to leave.
Quebec is Canada's oldest city. It's the only large Canadian metropolis where French is still spoken almost exclusively.
Quebec in the 1960s was...
Yeah, like, it's wild because I only speak English, no French at all. I think, like, what is it, 18% of the population can speak French. But there are areas where, like, you see a stop sign, and in many places you'll see the stop or arrêté or whatever it is in French. And then there are also places where you don't see the English of it anymore, and I'm like, what? I was out seeing my grandma somewhere in Nova Scotia. And there were places where there wasn't an English phrasing for it anymore. And French was by far the largest spoken language there. And so there are certainly communities where, inside Canada, where French is the dominant language. Even though as a country, I feel English is definitely our prominent language. I'm gonna make sure I get the numbers right. What percentage of Canadians speak French? And what percentage of Canadians speak only French? Because it's... Hi. I wonder, will it say hi back? Oh, I could probably have read those numbers. Oh, I missed. Turn expert. Fast response. Oh, it doesn't say hi back to me. Oh well. According to the 2021 census of populations from Statistics Canada, here are the figures. Percentage of Canadians who speak French. Much higher, 29.2. Percentage of Canadians who speak only French, 11 points. Where did I get my 17 number? 18. Both English and French. Okay, English only. 69% speak only English. Cool. More than a supermajority. French only, 11.2. Both English and French. 18%. Neither. 1.9. How do you speak either English or French? You really need one of them to function in our society. I suppose these could be people that have like come over recently to Canada. Uh, 98.1% of Canadians can speak one of the two official languages. I wonder what that is in the US. In the US, what percentage of Americans speak English? What percentage speak Spanish, and what percentage speak neither? Because those are the two U.S. languages, right? Like primarily English, but they also have like in high school we had to learn. We had French class. We did a terrible job at teaching you French, but did have to attend to a degree. I think in America the second language is Spanish. Try and teach you. Percentage who speak English at home, 78.3. So that's a good deal more Canadian. I guess like that doesn't, because you could put that 18 into English too. Probably about the same actually. Percentage who speak Spanish at home, 13. So they actually have more Spanish speakers than we have, percentage wise. They have more Spanish speakers than French speakers. Yeah, because that would be split between those. Okay. Break down language spoken at home. English, only English. Spanish, so English, 78.3. Spanish is about 13.6. Other languages, Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Arabic, approximately 8 to 9%. So, note on speak versus at home, these statistics for primary language spoken at home, not overall ability. Yeah, because you'll have people that can speak both, right? Vast majority of people who speak a non-English language at home also speak some English. Oh, only about 8.4 to 8.6% of the US population age 5 plus speak English less than very well. Percentage who speak. So they actually have far more language diversity. You have 1.2% that can't speak English. They have West 8 to 9% that don't speak English or Spanish. The other languages are Chinese to me. Huh. I wonder why this is. Like, I know Canada had a really good immigration policy for a long time. The way the immigration system was done, just done well. Guessing one of the most important things is for you to speak one of the primary languages of the country to come home. I also know that Canadian French is not exactly the same thing as France French. I've heard about that. Like, the difference between Canadian English and like UK English, there's like subtle difference, but Canadian French and France French, quite significant differences. Yeah. I hear a lot about how the Canadian immigration system used to be really good. Does that mean that it's currently not very good? Let's see if we can compare the old system to the new system. Am I getting off target? Off topic? No, we're not. Still on topic. Close enough. Close enough. Perception that Canada's immigration system used to be really good often refers to its long-standing reputation. The world's most selective point-based system focused on economic immigrants with high human capital. This approach centers on express entry, similar tools, emphasizing permanent residency from the start, strong integration outcomes, broad public support. Integration as a net positive for economic growth and culturalism. What changed and why the shift in perception? Starting around 2015, 2016, and accelerating post-pandemic, the system expanded dramatically in volume, shifted emphasis. Permanent resident targets rose sharply. Plans aiming for 500,000 annually by 2025, 2026. Actual emissions hit records like 484,000 in 2024. Temporary residents surged even more, pushing the under Trudeau, like they significantly expanded the immigration system, which is causing currently a lot of friction. Do they still use the point-based system? Surge even more, pushing the non-permanent population 2 to 3% historically, 6 to 7. This includes heavy reliance on student permits, lower wage temporary extreme. Population growth became almost entirely immigration driven. Still is. Like, the fertility rate of Canada is horrible, barely above places like Japan and South Korea. I mean, might even be below Japan. Been a while since I. Facing house, construction service. I mean, they expanded the immigration system and didn't expand anything, any of the services that serve the people around it. Serve the people. Housing, construction, infrastructure, and service capacity did not keep pace with how they expanded the system. This rapid scaling contributed to visible strains, a worsening housing affordability. Yeah. Current state. Federal government under the current administration, shifts from Trudeau to Carney eras, responded with significant course corrections starting in 2024-2025. Permanent resident targets reduced 395,000, stabilized at 380 annually. For my understanding is that they created another category and they've moved some permanent residents to this other category so that they can report lower immigration numbers. So I don't think they've actually significantly reduced targets. Economic class still dominate. Yeah, with some refocus on in-Canada education, language, education, and Canadian experience. Temporary residents curtailed. This is one of caps on international students slashed. They've cut down temporary residents significantly. Targets for new temporary workers also cut sharply to reduce overall temporary population share towards 5%. Still up from what it was, but down from its peak. The goal per official plan: pause or slow population growth short term, projected marginal decline in improve housing affordability, lower unemployment pressure, and restore balance while still targeting long-term economic benefit. Is it not very good now? Okay, that's what I want to know. Depends on the metric. Strengths retained, the core economic selection framework point/human capital focus still stronger and more transparent than many countries. Recent cohorts show better employment integration than some earlier ones. Canada remains the top destination per capita. Pathways to citizenship and multicultural core features. It's exposed the post 2015-2022 expansion strained capacity leading to integration challenge, public backlash, perception that volume sometimes trumps quality or sustainability. Temporary This is what I've seen. Yeah. Temporary to PR pathways, permanent residence pathways, expanded but created backlog and mismatch. Critics argue it moved away from pure merit-based selection towards other priority, continue to economic drags. Form in progress. Reduction and tightening addresses the main point. The main pain points. Oversupply relative to housing/services. Early data suggests temporary residence numbers are declining. Some housing pressure indicates modestly. However, businesses and universities have raised concern about labor shortages and revenue from lower student. Well, labor shortages, AI is going to revenue from lower student. I mean, that's just part of the system now, right? System changes, you have to adapt. Long-term success hinges on whether housing supply ramps up or economic newcomers continues improving. In short, the system wasn't broken foundational design, but overburdened by rapid, unmanaged growth. The current version is strained capacity, which many view as a necessary fix rather it regains its really good reputation will depend on execution. Economic needs, maintaining selectivity, building public trust, immigration remains essential for Canada's economic, but the pace and mix matter a lot. Okay. The permanent resident target. I've heard that the permanent residence targets in Canada, that the Carney has created like a new category, so to hide the actual permanent residents. Heard that the permanent resident targets in Canada. Heard that the permanent resident. Create created a new category to hide. Can you tell me more about this? I don't remember the exact phrasing. It was like okay, let's see. It'll probably get it. The claim you're heard refers to how Canada's 2026-28 immigration levels plan released and presented a headline permanent resident target annually for okay. This on. However, the plan also includes separate additional one-time or accelerated pathways. This is it. For people already in Canada as temporary residents. So they're not bringing in new permanent residents from outside of Canada. They are taking the temporary residents that have been allowed here in the past and creating a pathway temporary residents become permanent. So the actual external permanent residents are going down. They're creating additional pathways for temporary to become permanent. I mean, like the whole temporary residence, I can understand student visa, bringing people over to go to your universities. But a lot of the other ones, I guess, like if people come here just to, I don't know. I don't like the temporary residence system. like it all. Like, if you bring people over, there should be a pathway to permanent residency. Now, I believe we should be reducing the number that we're bringing over, because didn't we used to have it like when Canada's immigration was considered great, brought over like 200,000 a year. We're now bringing over double that still. I think we should get it back to like a manageable number. Our population's grown, but not to that degree. Like a target of what, 250,000? Anyway, however, the plan also includes separate additional one-time or accelerated pathways for people already in Canada as temporary residents. Critics argue these extras effectively mean the true number of permanent residence grants could be higher than the publicized 380,000 figure, making the overall intake lower than it is in practice. The new category or additional pathway. The main points of contention involving two key additional announcements alongside the 380K target. Up to 33,000 temporary workers, work permit holders. A one-time initiative to accelerate transition from temporary to permanent status in 2026. It targets skilled workers already contributing in Canada, often in high-demand sectors. Pathway is described as separate or annual target to help retain talent while reducing the temporary resident. See, I don't really mind this. I personally want that number to go. That is what I'll vote for. People that are already here, already working, like as long as they're integrating into society, I don't really care if they're a temporary resident or permanent resident. Approximately 115,000 protected persons in Canada are individuals already in the country who are being processed or fast-tracked for permanent residence over the next few years. Worker pathway, this is presented as additional to the standard 380K headline number. When combined, some analysts, commenters note that the effective total permanent resident grants could be closer to 445,000 in near term, depending on how the extras, rather than strictly 380,000 new arrivals from abroad. Government frames 380 as the planned admission targets across the usual categories, while the extras address backlogs or in Canada's transitions without counting against the headline cap in the same way. Okay, let's just go to the bottom of this because I started watching a video. We got 3 minutes through. Okay. The plan keeps permanent residents below 1% of Canada's population annually after 2027. Economic immigration remains the priority to provincial nominee programs and French-speaking targets outside Quebec. Temporary residents, caps, students, workers have seen steeper cuts. This approach tries to balance labor needs and retention of existing talents, capacity constraints. Whether the headline versus total distinction amounts to hiding numbers is debated. Yeah, government documents to disclose the extras. They are not folded into a single annual permanent residence figure that gets public attention. For the most precise and okay, just tell me. Honestly, like this initiative I like more than flat immigration number. I like the old ones back when the conservatives were government. Let's see. Can I get the permanent resident immigration numbers for the past 12 years in Canada? Let's see the chart.
Transforming fast. They launched sweeping reforms to modernize, and they became more deeply integrated with the rest of Canada. But this raised a concern. They were the only French-speaking region of North America, after this language and culture had largely been suppressed in other parts. In Louisiana, French was banned from education and mostly suppressed from public life. In parts of New England, Ontario, and Manitoba, the government...
To be fair, this is done massively in every country that's trying to create like a national identity. Like old school France had a lot of languages and they basically banned all of them but France and forcibly taught French everywhere in order to like significantly easier to bring your people together if there is a common language. We'll learn this a long time ago. Want to create an identity nation, more or less need common language. So this has always been done. It looks like it. French was one of the things suppressed in Louisiana. Chart. Okay, so they're not. It wasn't as low as I thought. 260. This is back. And when did Trudeau come in? Around. We start to see targets go. Ooh, sharp drop due to COVID. Okay. So these. What was he? Did 4 years before COVID. Next, and then you see the huge increase. And now it looks like they're trying to get the targets back to something more normal. All right. Yeah, I agree. Like I want to aim. Our population's grown significantly, so I'd say around 300K. Be like if I was prime minister, around 300K, what I would aim for. Permanent resident. And I mean temporary residents, I don't like that system. Temporary resident system reminds me of the immigration that happened in the US. That system should be addressed. Looks like they're trying to at least. Okay.
Continue. Had actively suppressed the language, and the large French-speaking population was assimilated within just a couple of generations. As Quebec was modernizing, there emerged a nationalist movement. They were given the mandate to hold a referendum on independence, and this was a great concern in Ottawa. Pierre Trudeau was Prime Minister, and he promised that if Quebec voted to stay, they would change Canada's constitution. 60% voted against, and now they had work to do. But the negotiations were very difficult. They happened mostly behind closed doors.
Is that why French is our second language? Canada?
And they lacked transparency. All the provinces partook, but one night, the other...
Like, we still see echoes of this, right? They got really mad at that airline CEO who couldn't speak French, that they got him fired. They got so mad that he couldn't speak French.
provinces had reached a deal after Quebec's premier had already left, and he felt betrayed, and he refused to sign the new constitution. This led to more talks, and Ottawa tried to bring Quebec into the constitution. After 5 years of negotiating, they signed the Meech Lake Accord, which was by many seen as a much more favorable deal to Quebec, and it showed. In the years between the 1982 Constitution and when the Meech Lake Accord was signed, the movement calling for independence lost much of its momentum. But there was a caveat. This accord could only come into effect if all...
Wait. There's something on that graph. Meech Lake Accord signed. Independence spiked?
lost much of its momentum, but there was a caveat. This accord could only come into effect if all provinces unanimously ratified the deal, and it wasn't well received at all. For years, the deal was discussed and criticized. Quebec wanted to be recognized as a distinct society, which other provinces interpreted as them asking for special treatment. And they wanted all provinces to be treated equally. By 1990, the accord had officially failed, and over this time, support for independence in Quebec rose to a record 65%. A growing number of people felt that change could not come from within, and this set the pretext for that 1995 referendum where the vote was decided by less than 60,000 people. That's when another province started flirting with the idea of leaving. Canada is an incredibly diverse country. They speak both English and French, they have indigenous nations, oil provinces, and financial hubs. Alberta runs mostly on energy, while Ontario drives manufacturing. They agreed to let provinces shape policy to fit their local realities, but people are increasingly skeptical about the role of Ottawa.
Sainte-Catherine, devant le métropolis, vous voyez une autre arrestation, car ils n'ont pas envie d'accepter le résultat.
Since the late 1990s, in all provinces and regions of Canada, the number of people who see more advantages than disadvantages of having a federalist system has been in decline.
Canada's federalism has more advantages than disadvantages. Percentage of people that say this? Not sure. It's hovering around 50% nowadays. Quebec and the West are going down. Atlantic, Ontario are up. I mean, like, the collective bargaining of larger Canada is significant. Giving the provinces, I think, more sway their own economics is probably a good thing. But like the larger units are largely support Alberta staying a part of Canada, fighting to gain more independence, their own economic future, control over how they want to do immigration, control how the province wants to do things.
In the West, that figure has dropped from 60% in 1998 to just 41% in 2019, and Alberta is a noteworthy example. They found oil in the late 1940s, and this transformed Alberta from being a farming province with wheat.
I mean, a lot of it still is. I've driven across Alberta. There is a lot of wheat fields. A lot of wheat fields. The southern part of the province is all agriculture.
Cattle and wide prairies, to an economy defined by oil. Its history with the federal government made it fiercely protective of its control over natural resources. But Ottawa was going to challenge that.
My colleagues in the government and I have come reluctantly to believe that the price of oil in Canada must go up.
During the global oil shocks of the 1970s, the prices of oil suddenly soared. and this had a tremendous impact on the entire country. Energy suddenly became a matter of national security, and Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau responded by introducing the National Energy Program. This officially aimed at ensuring energy security and to redistribute Canada's oil wealth more evenly across the provinces. But Alberta had a different perspective. The federal government imposed price controls and high taxes. This led to investment to slow and some of their rigs to shut down. This was still manageable because the price of oil was very high. But as the prices collapsed in the 1980s, thousands of people in Alberta lost their jobs. Home values fell province-wide, and many Albertans felt that the federal policies had worsened the crash. When Alberta was formed, they weren't given equal control over their natural resources, and now the National Energy Program crystallized the narrative that Alberta's oil wealth could be taken away by Ottawa. This drove feelings of alienation and resentment in the 1980s and 90s. Today, Alberta often pays more to the federal government per capita than any other province. Ottawa redistributes wealth from wealthier provinces to poorer ones to ensure comparable public services across Canada.
Our province has contributed hundreds of billions of dollars more to the federal treasury for use in other parts of the country than will ever receive back in benefits.
But Alberta needs the other provinces. They mostly ship their oil through pipelines to refineries in the United States, but in the mid-2010s, the markets saw another shock. After many years of high oil prices, a barrel of crude suddenly lost nearly half its value in a single year, and the United States made it even worse. They offered prices that were substantially lower than the market value, and this exposed a vulnerability. If Alberta exports nearly all of its oil to the United States, they have little control over how much they can charge. This intensified the campaign to invest in infrastructure to help bring their oil to the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, from where it could be exported to other foreign markets. But this means that Alberta must cross other provinces. A proposed pipeline through the Rocky Mountains faced environmental opposition.
I mean, like, this is how all countries do it. You look at Russia, back when they had good ties with the European Union, they built pipelines to ship their oil. Pay countries they shipped oil through in order to have that pipeline there transit their country. These have always happened, but I imagine being part of Canada makes this easier.
And legal challenges in British Columbia. Another proposed pipeline through Quebec was met with a similar kind of resistance. Many in Alberta felt that they were funding a country that was blocking its main industry, and in return, they had very limited power in the federal government.
We will make life more affordable. We will continue to fight climate change.
I mean, like, I hate this guy. He did so much damage to Canada. Everything he said was a lie. He didn't do any of it. He actively harmed everything. It was... So many of the charts, like, look at the US and it's Reagan. All of the charts started to go really bad when Reagan took office. Canada, it's Trudeau. All of the lines, all of the charts start to go bad when he took office. It was a massive mistake.
And we will keep investing in Canadians.
In 2019, Justin Trudeau was re-elected, and the vote showed deep...
He was re-elected because of COVID. COVID happened. Had the response of hand people money during COVID. Guess what? If you hand people money, they like you, and they'll vote for you. That's how he got reelected. He had to put up with him for 8 years.
Provincial divisions. Trudeau's party won a significant share of the vote in large provinces like Ontario and Quebec, but in western provinces like British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, his party was deeply unpopular. It didn't matter that most Albertans had voted Conservative. The power in the federal government went to the Liberals, and Wexit went viral.
Wexit, a new effort to tap into a separatist sentiment.
Come on. Come on. You can do better than that. That's a terrible name.
In Alberta.
Separation, is that a viable plan B?
What's the numbers? What are the numbers? What percentage of people in Alberta want to vote to separate from Canada? Will vote to separate, want to vote to separate.
If we can't work this out.
It called for Alberta, and sometimes together with Saskatchewan, to leave Canada, and rallies were held at Alberta's legislature.
Look no further than this upside-down Canadian flag, where hundreds gathered.
Distress. They're in distress. That's what that means, right? I feel sorry for the people that can't put their flag upside down. Let's see. 27% of decided voters would vote to separate. 26. What about this one? 29. 20. Thing is, numbers like this can swing wildly. You were looking at those graphs earlier, right? Seeing these like this one. Where am I? And like, look at how like one action wild swing from they're sitting at like 26, so we're at like 29. One action can cause a wild swing, and if you set up to have your vote here, and then if you can trigger this action, get separation. That's a scary number to have. If a province votes to separate, what else happens? Like, are there more steps? Do they separate? I imagine there are significant other hurdles you have to get through. Yes. A provincial referendum is only the starting point. So it's not like a Brexit. Brexit was the vote. Okay, the government goes through with it. But it looks like there's more to the duty to negotiate. Referendum passes, the clarity test Supreme Court ruling creates constitutional obligation for the federal government and other province to negotiate in good faith. And constitutional amendment is required for actual separation. Canadian Constitution, there is no unilateral right to leave. So, even if you vote to separate, there's not actually, you don't just get to separate. The standard amendment formula for this would generally be the 750 rule. Approval by at least 7 provinces representing at least 50% of Canada's population plus federal approval. So even if you vote to separate, you don't separate. I mean, that makes sense. But there would be a lot of, bottom line, a yes vote in a provincial referendum would trigger negotiations at most, not immediate separation. Actual separation is widely viewed as by constitutional experts as extremely difficult or practically possible without broader national consensus, which is currently absent. Most Canadians and residents of other provinces strongly oppose it. In short, a referendum vote is symbolic and starts a conversation. That is the basics. A referendum vote is symbolic and starts a conversation. Like, I got no problem with a conversation. But many more steps, negotiations, it'll never. Where was I? 10. The distress flag.
than this upside-down Canadian flag, where hundreds gathered to discuss separation.
We're going to make Alberta great again, and that is when we cut ourselves off from the leech.
Like, the thing most people don't know is that culturally, Canada is quite similar to the. You would be surprised by how many people there are like this. Like how many people would support Trump or would lean into make Alberta great again. Honestly, like if it wasn't for Trump's whole push of the 51st state on Canada, he'd probably be pretty popular. Like I think he'd see near equal popularity in Canada as he sees in the US if it wasn't for that push. It was the 51st state push that pushed the Canadian people away from him and the US in general, in my opinion. In my opinion, massive tactical error on his part. Like if you ever think he's thinking in like 5D chess, just remember how much he shot himself in the foot by getting another liberal elected in Canada with his rhetoric. All right, let's continue.
That is Eastern Canada.
Polls showed support for independence climbing into the high 20s and sometimes 30%. But while some people truly want independence, another poll showed that 1 in 5 saw their
I don't want independence. I want more control over my oil profits in my province. I want more control over the industry. I want more control over the immigration. I want to be able to develop the province in specific ways that we can't do at the moment. And in Canada, like the provinces have more power. Quebec had their push, their independence push, and now they have the Bloc Québécois, I think it's called, as a standing political party, the federal government that gets seats every time because of their initial independence push. Like, if we could do something like that, I think that would be good.
Leave vote as a symbolic way to express their political frustrations. But what if a clear majority voted to leave? What would happen next? After the razor-thin 1995 elections in Quebec, Canadian lawmakers started defining the legal path to secession. They passed the Clarity Act in 2000, which says a clear majority in favor of secession would be required to create an obligation to negotiate secession. In other words, the process of declaring independence starts with a referendum, and a clear win creates a duty to negotiate, but that doesn't automatically grant the right to leave. In Quebec, the main driver for separatism is that they want to protect their language and their culture, and they see Quebec as a distinct nation. Separatists believe that the federal government is dominated by the English-speaking provinces, and the diplomatic failures of the 1980s.
I mean, like, it definitely is.
Reinforced the belief that it cannot be resolved from within. But would it solve anything?
Like, you can resolve pretty much anything. I look at the US and Iran, they're slowly figuring out how to resolve their difference. Yes, there had to be bombs dropped, but they're figuring it out. Like, French is our nation has two primary languages. French, even though, what is it, like 70% Canadians speak just English, and only like 12% speak French. Like, I think that's fine.
If they declare independence, The long-term trend is that a growing number of people in Quebec favor to stay in Canada, which makes independence unlikely. But if it does come through, it is uncertain what would happen next. Canada is Quebec's main trading partner, and they would have to renegotiate a trade deal.
Canada is Quebec's. I mean, look at the border.
Their borders would change. Supply chains and investment could be disrupted. It would cause currency issues. They would have to build their own national defense force. Separatism feeds on real greed.
I don't think you understand all the problems with your own independent nation. Creates a lot of issues.
Grievances and real critique.
I personally don't see Quebec or Alberta separating time. I don't think they should, and I don't think they will.
But where it often falls short is that it presents independence as
But there's no problem with a conversation.
a solution to all these problems, while they hardly discuss the ripple effect that it would have across all public sectors. It often confuses temporary cycles for structural oppression. In Quebec, support for separatism often increases whenever there is a perception that the national government is against their interests. But governments change. Similarly, in Alberta, support for separatism often increases whenever the oil industry is under pressure. Their main driver for separatism is the economy. They feel like the other provinces and federal policies are negatively impacting their main industry, and that they have limited political power.
I think you're going to see a change in this, but like I said, Trudeau focused on environmental policy, which, extracting oil does harm the environment. It is not an environmentally friendly activity. Certainly not the fracking we do here in Canada. This whole thing, Alberta separatism thing, I think is because Trudeau and his government were so hostile to the oil industry. One day we got to get off oil. I don't see that happening short. We are making strides. Renewables are good. Still have an issue with energy storage. Batteries suck energy storage. That'll have to be fixed before we can try and get off oil. But I think oil's going to continue to power the world and incredibly important. Like another 50 years. Investment into this is be good now. I think when all I've seen, Carney is much more friendly to the oil industry. Is Carney more supportive of the oil industry than Trudeau was? See what it says.
Power, but as oil cycles turned and national policies adapted, support for separatism has historically faded. The problem then is that separatism is often linked to temporary cycles, while the question of independence is very structural, very fundamental, and it's very difficult to reverse. But the fact that these discussions are held can be construed as something very positive and something very typically Canadian. It's all rooted in how Canada confederated. They decided to have a form of government where the differences between provinces were encouraged, and they did this by allowing a substantial degree of autonomy. But for this to work, the provinces had to work together, and this required constant negotiation. That is still the case today. Each of the Canadian provinces is seeking to balance federal with provincial power. And as society evolves, this must constantly be negotiated to adapt to new realities. The system is flawed, but it's fluid. So you may have noticed that our channel right now is getting a fraction of the views that it used to get about a year ago. And one of the main reasons that I see for this is that we're getting a lot of negative engagement. So the biggest thing that I notice is that if a video...
negative engagement hurts you?
The first couple of days is getting a lot of dislikes or it's getting a lot of negative comments that is interpreted by YouTube as a sign that it is a bad video. But I really do want to believe that there's an audience out there of people that appreciate.
I mean, to be fair, like engagement is. Alright, well I'm gonna link video here. This chat. Boom. Boom. Okay. Gotta play around with the thing over here. Not right now. That's the question. Thought. Yes, Mark Carney has shown more pragmatic and cooperative support for Canada's oil and gas industry, particularly Alberta's oil sands. Justin Trudeau did in his later office. However, the difference is one of degree and tone rather than universal. Carney remains committed to long-term net zero emissions by 2050 climate goal. 2050 seems like a short period to get to net zero emissions to me. I feel does net zero emissions indicate how much you emit and then how much you take out? Because from my understanding, the boreal forest that we have up there in Canada, massive CO2 sink, absorbs massive amounts of CO2, far more than it is a country. He has prioritized economic growth, competitiveness, collaboration with industry and provinces over strict regulatory limits. Like that's the direction we got to move in. Bottom line, Carney has been more supportive and proactive so far. Fewer direct production constraints, more openness to new pipelines / export infrastructure, and a willingness to negotiate rather than impose unilateral federal rule. This reflects political realities and a strategic pivot towards making Canada an energy superpower that export more responsibly produced oil and gas while pursuing emission reductions through technology. That said, he has not abandoned climate goals. Okay. How do I phrase it? How much CO2 is produced in Canada? How much CO2 is absorbed by the forests within Canada? Oh, have I hit my... Still good. I think when you put it on expert mode, you get less communication, responses. Canada's total greenhouse gas emissions, primarily CO2 and other gases expressed as CO2 equivalent, are approximately 685-ish megaton CO2 per year in recent decades. Okay, so megatons of CO2 Q per year. Or we'll just use the megatons. A forest, net carbon balance. Canada's vast boreal forest, one of the world's largest, both absorb and release CO2 through growth, decay, harvesting, and natural disturbance like wildfires and insects. Gross absorption. Carbon uptake by growing forest vegetation is substantial, often hundreds of megatons annually in normal years, but it's offset by releases. Net effect on Managed forest. Canada's managed forests have been a net carbon source, releasing more CO2 than they absorb in most years since around 2001. This is largely due to increased wildfires, insect outbreaks, and harvesting. Oh. In high fire years like 2023, wildfires alone reached enormous amounts. Like the climate change is making a lot of northern forests in Canada far more likely to burn than they used to. Natural reasons. Canada states clearly that since 1990, Canada's managed forests have generally become a net carbon source rather than a sink when in off fluxes. Why a net source? Wildfires and harvesting release stored carbon faster than regrowth can absorb it in many years. Post-fire regrowth eventually, much of it, but the timing, increased disturbance frequency matter. When included in total national GHG totals, it can slightly lower the reported figure in low fire years. It does not turn Canada into a net zero or net negative emitter overall. Energy and oil and gas sectors dominate the human-caused footprint. Okay, so the information I'd heard before was just wrong. It seems like forests are not actually a large source of a large carbon sink. Like, it makes sense to me because the tree gets eventually dies and the carbon is released, right? But I thought they were more of a carbon sink. I mean, like, the whole fight carbon thing is planting trees. Okay, let's get down here. In summary, Canada emits roughly 690 MT CO2 metric tons of carbon I don't know what that is, annually from human activities. While the forests provide significant gross absorption, have been a net source of emission in recent decades due to disturbances, meaning they do not fully offset the country's fossil fuel and other emissions. Okay. Let me ask another question. If forests can be a net source of carbon emissions, then they're not a very good carbon sink, correct? If so, then why is there such a push to plant trees to fight climate change? Let's see. Like, do trees not do what we think they do? Stop rolling. Yes, you're correct in a narrow sense. If a specific forest or country managed forest like Canada's is a net carbon source in a given period, releasing more CO2 than it's not acting as a carbon sink during that time. Canada's official data confirms this for its managed forest in many years, primarily due to intensified wildfires, insect harvesting, legacy effect of past disturbance. Let's get why forests can flip between sink and source. Gross uptake is still huge. Growing trees and vegetations absorb substantial carbon via photosynthesis every year. Net balance depends on release, decay, respiration, harvesting, and especially natural disturbances like wildfires or pests. In Canada's case, managed forests were often a net sink historically. Okay. But disturbances have tipped the balance in recent decades. Unmanaged or broader territorial ecosystems can behave differently. Post-disturbance regrowth eventually reabsorbs much of the released carbon over decades, though accelerated disturbance under warming can outpace recovery. Why the push to plant trees, restore forests? Tree planting and forest restoration remains promoted as part of climate strategies for several evidence-based reasons, even accounting for the risks you've noted. Additional carbon storage in the right context. Planting trees previously non-forested or degraded land can create a new plant sink. So putting a forest where there isn't a forest creates a good sink. Young forests sequester carbon quickly as they grow. Global estimates suggest forests existing plus restored still provide a net sink overall. Historically, absorbing around 25 to 30% of annual CO2 emissions from fossil fuels. Though this is weakening due to disturbances, targeted restoration can transfer carbon from the atmosphere into biomass soil for decades to centuries. Avoid worsening outcomes. The strongest climate benefits often come from protecting existing intact forests rather than just planting new ones. Deforestation and degradation turn sinks into sources, stopping that preserved stores carbon take. Many plant trees campaigns pair with anti-deforestation effort. Natural regeneration and degradation co-benefits beyond timing and scale matters. Limitations acknowledged in science. In short, forests can be excellent carbon sinks under stable conditions, but climate change itself, via fires, droughts, pests, is undermining that role in many places, including Canada. The push for planting/restoration is about expanding or recovering that capacity where feasible, while prioritizing protection of existing forests and aggressive cuts to human emissions. One tool in a larger kit, not a silver bullet, as heavily on how, where, alongside what other actions to pursue. Okay, so forests are good. Climate change itself is making them less effective through wildfires, pests, and stuff like that. Because Canada historically had large wildfires. Recently, it's become no longer a sink, but a carbon source. That is unfortunate. I thought our large forests did more. They do not.